for having me this evening. Again, my name is Tom Selges. I'm going to be talking to you tonight about the dollar. Most of you probably don't really have a clear understanding of what the dollar is. The dollar is actually a constitutional term. And we're going to look at this, and we're going to look at what happened to that definition and what laws came back into place, thanks be to God, to people like Ronald Reagan and Congressman Ron Paul in the early 80s. And we're going to see what the effect is on our economy today by not following that constitutional standard. So with that, oops, excuse me, pushed the thing the wrong way. I'd like to have a quote here from Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson said, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered." That's where we are today. Our founding fathers understood something, and they understood it through a quick lesson that they learned during the period of Articles of Confederation. During the period of the Articles of Confederation, the Continental Congress issued something called the Continental. Now, how many of you remember "worthless as a Continental" when you were in school learning about that in history? Well, that phrase came from the emissions of what was called bills of credit. And bills of credit were legal tender paper currency. And what do we have in the United States of America today? Legal tender paper currency, or bills of credit, which have been emitted. Well, the bills of credit that existed then only lasted about 8 years. And during that 8-year period, America almost no longer existed. And we'll look at some quotes from people like George Washington and James Madison of what happened during that stage. I'm sorry, you want a picture?
Well, we got a minute. Let me just say, something's wrong. Something in the system is making the lights go up and down.
So it's rolling blackouts.
The dial or anything, just get Mr. Sargis kind of mad, but the lights are just going up and down on their own. We haven't quite figured out how to stop it.
Okay.
I mean, I can turn them all off if you want to work in the dark.
Yeah, it's Bush's fault. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have 3 takeaway points tonight. The first one is the U.S. monetary system, i.e. the Federal Reserve System, is unconstitutional and violates the rule of law. And believe it or not, Tom Selges didn't say this. The government's own documents came to this conclusion. 2, the U.S. monetary system is dishonest. And 3, the U.S. monetary system that exists today will blow up. So let's take a look at the first point. First of all, let's ask the question, what is $1? Most people don't understand that the dollar is actually a unit of measure. It's analogous to time, length, and weight. But it's the form of an hour as in time, or an ounce as in weight, or an inch in length. And that is, it's a monetary unit of silver. The dollar has been and always will be a unit of silver weight that represents money. In the Constitution, the term dollar actually appears twice. It appears in Article 1, Section 9, which we'll look at in a minute, but we're going to take a look at the powers of the Congress itself. In Section 8, Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin. And I want to stop right there. In 1971, Richard Nixon, by executive order, took us off the quote-unquote gold standard. Now, what's amazing to me is if he had read the Constitution, which he took an oath to uphold, and understood what the Constitution said, he should have walked down to the halls of Congress and said, listen, the French, the Canadians, and the English are giving us paper and taking our silver and gold out of the country in exchange. And what should have happened is Congress, under the foreign coin provision there, should have said, wait a minute, they're clad coins, meaning some base metallic or even plastic these days, coins are worth 1,000th of what their original coins used to be. So for instance, a Canadian dollar should have been valued at 1,000th of an American silver dollar. But that's not what happened. What happened, what did he do? He fell into the banker's trap, and he took us off of any rational standard to adhere to a unit of measure that would have prevented us from ever having the inflationary events we see today, and the debt we have accumulated as a result of that. As I was saying, in Article 1, Section 9, Clause 1, we have the term $10, or the word dollar appearing there. And we also have it at the 7th Amendment, which again I'll come back to in a moment. But we have in Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin and tender in payment of debts. This means that within the state, they're supposed to make sure that nothing but gold and silver coins are used as a payment and tender of debt. How many states obey that today? Well, we recently had Utah enact a law that recognizes the legal tender status of gold and silver coin, which, as we'll see in a minute, has been on the books since 1982, was a stopgap measure, but 1985. The 7th Amendment then talks about all suits in common civil proceedings where a case is valued at $20 or more. A right to a trial by jury shall be preserved. And you think to yourself, why in the world would you want to have a jury trial over $20? Well, $20 back then was equal to, a $20 coin at least, is today around 2,000 bucks. So you can see the inflationary effects that we've had when we call the green note a dollar versus what the Constitution and our founding fathers envisioned. So let's take a look at another portion of the Congress's responsibility to regulate the value. We had a bimetallic system, base system where you had primary coinage of silver and gold, and then you had sub-coinage made in other metals, and those other metals could be like copper or nickel. And the purpose of the regulation was you always knew the value of the silver, because the silver was the standard from which the other metals were then used. And America was the first country to put a date on their coins. And the reason they put a date on their coins was to preserve the value of that coin at the time that it was minted. And this is one reason why you and I, the public, are not allowed to melt down coins. Because the market condition for copper, or the market condition for nickel, and actually even the market condition for gold, could change relative to the market condition that existed for silver. So silver was the standard unit, and as gold became less available, more scarce, the weight of gold that you would have in a coin would decrease. But the silver amount that you could always exchange for, you know what it is. And so on a particular date, you could go back into a regulation from Congress to say, hey, on this particular date, they regulated that 1 cent was 46.3 grains of copper. And that's what the market condition put between the silver dollar and the penny. The same holds true for the $10 coin. That was the original eagle. And the $1 coin there. So the gold was regulated at a value of 247.5 grains of gold. Today, for instance, the $10 coin is 240 grains of gold. So Congress's responsibility to regulate was always against the fixed standard of silver. My battery must be running a little low. A bit of history. The dollar was actually a term defined by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain. Now, there's a lot of write-ups that you'll see the Thaler, where most people think that the Germans or the Prussians came up with the term dollar in 1517, but the actual historical fact is it came out of Spain in 1497, and it was established as the standard unit of measure. And that standard unit of measure had become prevalent throughout the whole world. All the merchants throughout the world started using that and trading these dollars and these minted coins containing 371 grains. Actually, it was 376 plus or minus so many grains, because back in 1497 their measurements weren't as accurate as they were in 1792 during our first coinage act, or subsequently as we have today. But needless to say, it was roughly 371 and 4/16 grains of silver. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella established that standard, and if any of you have an old Webster's dictionary, when I say old, I'm talking about 1964 version or before, or you can go to the University of Chicago, and the University of Chicago has done a dictionary project. It's phenomenal. And you can look at almost every version of English and French dictionaries from today to the 16 or 1500s. And you can go look at definitions of words, how they appeared. And in Webster's dictionary, up through 1964, you will see that a dollar was defined as 371 and 0.25, they say there, 1/4 instead of 4/16 grains of silver, or they have what they call the trade dollar of 420 grains of silver. And I'll discuss the trade dollar a little later. But needless to say, that definition throughout American history existed from the establishment of this country. Actually, if the word dollar appeared in the Constitution, everybody had to know what it meant. And it continued in the dictionaries up through 1964. And what's happened is we were snookered into believing that that green note had equivalent value of the silver coin, to the point where we now take the note, which is a promise to pay that silver coin, and treat it as if it was the silver coin. But yet, if you go online today, I think it was 39 something, I think it's 39 bucks to get a $1 silver coin today. So obviously they're not the same. So in 1981, this happens, you can't see the date there. In 1981, Public Law 96-389 was passed. That's when Ronald Reagan first took office. And in March 31st, 1982, the then Secretary Donald Reagan delivered to Congress and back to the White House, based on the public law that was passed, this report. And this report, in it, quotes some things. Thomas Jefferson again. If we determine that the dollar shall be our unit, we must then say with precision what a dollar is. Our founding fathers followed that advice in 1792. The dollar was defined as 371 grains of silver. From 1792 until August 1971, the dollar was defined as the precise weight of silver or gold. Well, let me tell you this. Technically, that wasn't correct. How our founding fathers came up with that was, like I said, in 1497, when King Ferdinand established the standard, the accuracy of the weights was pretty broad. So what Jefferson and Madison decided to do is they decided to go into the marketplace and get 1,000 coins and weigh the 1,000 coins and take the average and said, this is what people are accepting as the dollar. And they were within the range that King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella